it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts. It's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast. Ben Grant on my own here today. JB will rejoin us again next week. We've got a great show for you today, and this show, as always, is brought to you by Funny Bone Broth, which I'm being told is sold out just about everywhere. You can still get it at McEwen's in the TD Center, but they wanted me to let you know that their production is resuming shortly as they're moving to a brand new kitchen facility this weekend. So look for Funny Bone Broth at a store near you. A lot of stuff to talk about today, and I'm going to get through it as smoothly as I can, operating solo here. Our interview this week is with Darren Stevenson from 519 Sports Online. I'm really looking forward to this one because Darren and I were besties going way back about 20 years ago. He was just starting out at TSN, and I think I was working for Energy FM at the time under a much cooler name. And unfortunately, geography sort of tore us apart as he ended up down in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, working for CTV down there and covering high school and university sports, which I think is such an amazing thing. Like, so many times over the last few months when I've talked to Toronto Argonauts players about their high school football experience in America, you know, we've talked about the media coverage and the pressure and stuff like that. And, you know, just the availability when you play for a big time high school program in the States, or when you play obviously for any sort of university football program in the States, the media coverage is so much more than what it is here. There's little to no coverage of high school football, high school sports, and the coverage of university sports is, you know, it's just not very good. The people that cover it very well, but there's just not a lot of people that cover it. It is really hard to find a lot of university sports on television. And Darren in the 519 area has been doing such an amazing job over the last few years, trying to get around to as many places as he can. And that, you know, 519 Sports Online has grown tremendously in the last 3 years, but they cover absolutely everything. They're all over the high school sports scene. They're all over covering Guelph and Waterloo and Laurier. And I'm really excited to talk about some of our products, the Toronto Argonauts products that have come out of those three schools, because Darren not only covers them, but he gets to know these guys really well. There's a real difference between covering amateur athletics and professional athletics in terms of, you know, the relationships that you can sort of forge, because I think their, you know, shields aren't really up the same way. And so, yeah, I want to talk to him about Eric Starczala, who may be starting at center this year for the Argos. I want to talk about Dion Pellerin, the running back that the Argos just drafted, first running back off the board. And we'll ask him, you know, what he thinks about that. And I know he knows Chris Ackie really well also, so we'll talk to him about Ackie and see what else we can dig out of Darren Stevenson as we go through that interview. But that's coming up in just a few minutes, and I'm really looking forward to that. Other Argos news this week: congratulations to the Wilder Jr. family. And the baby's name, baby boy, named Josiah Christian Wilder. And you can see photos of a very cute baby on Wilder Jr.'s Twitter account. So do check that out and make sure to congratulate the former Argonaut running back. The other, some other news, well, MLSE was in the news a little bit as Rod Peterson basically lit things on fire on his show when he started talking about how MLSE might be calling the shots in the CFL. And this upset a lot of people, as you could imagine. You know, across Canada, the Argonauts are not the most popular team outside of Toronto. And MLSE is probably not the most popular ownership group outside of Toronto. And so, yeah, there were a lot of some of the Twitter comments were astonishing. So, yeah, that's sort of interesting. I don't know if there's anything to that. You know, he talked about the relationship that MLSE has with Ambrosi, and then the fact that they've got money at a time when the league needs money. And so, you know, could there be some sort of connection there? What would it mean? And the implications are a little bit frightening the way he put it. And you should really check that out. He's got that available on his, the highlights are available on his Twitter account. And you can, of course, watch yesterday's show to see how that all went down. There's going to be, we're going to have our own firestorm, I think, this week in Argoland, because TSN finally this Friday is going to be putting out the all-time Argos team. And I know people are going to go bananas because it's so hard. There's no one right way to do it. JB and I were talking just a few weeks ago about how hard it is to choose the best anything of all time on the Argos, with maybe a couple exceptions in there with maybe at receiver, but even that, you get into a conversation. But JB had written a story about statues outside BMO, Argos statues, and he was trying to narrow it down to 4 statues, and the process is just so difficult. I'm hearing that the quarterback is going to be Conrich Holloway, which I love. Conrich Holloway was my favorite player when I was just getting into football as a young kid. And I would love for him to be named the quarterback of the all-time Argos team from TSN. But I don't know. I think there are going to be so many people thinking that it should be Doug Flutie. And it's hard to argue. My argument is just that Flutie was only with the team for 2 years, but they were an amazing 2 years. Ricky Ray, of course, had an amazing career as an Argo. His numbers are outstanding. You get, Damon Allen, obviously, in the conversation as well. There's and a number of guys. You could really expand the list to about 15 guys. If you really wanted to get into it and talk about different eras and different times. But I know that position, probably more than anything else, is going to start some conversations, and maybe that's not a bad thing. So I'm excited about that. So that's this Friday. We'll see if we can get one of the guys from TSN on for next week's podcast, and we'll grill them a little bit about some of the selections and see why they went with who they went with. So I'm looking forward to that. And one thing that this is not a paid sponsorship, but I think you might have an interest in it, so I'm going to go through it. There's a pretty good sale on Argos gear. The Argos tweeted out a link yesterday, and I'm just going to pull it up here for myself. So from Real Sports Apparel, it's 40% off all their Argos gear if you use the code TOGETHER40, all caps. And so if you need to replenish your Argos gear, 40% off sounds like a good idea. And I myself just spilled coffee all over I'm wearing an older Argos jersey for those of you listening, and I've got a massive coffee spill right down the numbers, the white numbers, and it's so, I can tell right now just looking at it, this is going to be, it's just not going to come out. I'm going to have a coffee stain on my white numbers of my favorite Argos jersey for the rest of my life. So I may be in the market for a new jersey. The jersey selection isn't terrific, and this is something we talked about. I talked about this with Shaq Richardson and Alden Darby, back a month ago, how it's really hard to get a hold of current player jerseys, and you see that illustrated here when I'm looking at the website. You can, however, get a blank jersey and then have it customized for whichever player you want. But the stock jerseys they've got there are Flutie, Theismann, Ishmael, and Clemens, of course, in the blue. And then there's the only white jersey they have available. They have the blank white jersey that you can customize, and then there's, of course, the Pinball Clemens white jersey. And I think I might be in the market for that. I don't own a white Argos jersey, and I feel like that's one I need to add to my collection. So if you're looking for some new Argos stuff, again, I'm just letting you know, so you know, but there's no sponsorship or anything like that. I just figure Argos fans are always looking out for Argos gear, and 40% off sounds pretty good to me. I'm joined now by award-winning journalist and my old buddy Darren Stevenson from 519 Sports Online. It's great to see you again. Thanks for coming by and talking some sports.
It's been a while, Ben. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, well, so I still live in the west end of Toronto, and I think about you every time I drive by Queensway and Kipling, because we spent we spent 2 years of our lives watching every Monday Night Football game at Don Cherry's Bar and Grill, which is like long since gone.
That's still fun.
Yeah, I know. Playing QB1 and complaining about the food every Monday night. But yeah, there's so many occasions where I just remember back to, a time where we had no responsibilities and, nothing to worry about.
I enjoyed those times.
Yeah, no, it was good stuff.
And when I think about it now and looking back, you have all the free time in the world, and the Monday Night Football 9:00 kickoff was the most important thing that sort of happened, in our day. I was still in school and obviously, got to know you a little bit. But boy, it's funny to think how many years ago that's been. And it's great to see you doing as well as you are. And, obviously I'm really happy with where 519 Sports Online is at. So, good times. And yeah, God, that was a long time ago though, Ben.
We are old. We are very old, and it's 519 is so exciting because, and especially one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you today is that you kind of get a glimpse into a world that we really don't get to see in professional sports. Like you know what it's like. Like you've worked for TSN and the Fan and CTV, and you know what covering professional sports is like. But working with 519 Sports Online, you're able to cover, university teams, for example, like Guelph and Laurier, Waterloo, and we've got a bunch of Argos that went to those schools. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. But you get to know players probably in a different way than you do covering sports professionally in Toronto, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's one of the really great things that, 519 has kind of brought me. I worked in the mainstream media for 15 years or so and got laid off in March of 2017 and started this platform. I call it a positive promotional platform. And it started in October of 2017. And it's amazing the relationships and just the people that you meet. You start a business, and that's what it is. It's a local sports business sort of here in our 519 community, and you never really know how it's going to go, and you're hopeful and you think, this thing has the potential to hopefully take off. But meeting the people is probably the best part in sort of building those personal relationships with you. Now, I also think one of the things that I've done with this platform, Ben, is I call it positive, and we don't focus on negatives. So we don't look at injuries. We don't do coaches yelling on the sidelines. For example, it is never a turnover. It's always a steal. And that's some of the verbiage that we use. So I think in that sense as well, it's allowed me to obviously grow my business to where it is now. But it's really also allowed me to build those relationships where, people trust the fact that, what we're doing at 519 Sports, we're presenting things in a positive way. Is it journalism? It's one sense of journalism, the standard journalism that you and I would think about from going to school, like we talked about, 15, 20 years ago. No, it's not. But I think, in a world that's full of a lot of negativity, right now, that I think if we can contribute something positive through doing highlights, player profiles, things along those lines, and I think we've done something pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome, and I love those like the positive way of looking at things. It's amazing, and we do our share of that. It's a little harder, I think. Covering the Argos isn't always positive, but X's and Argos
too, right? And I think, like you said, we're covering unpaid amateur athletes. You talk about university sports. We do a lot of high school sports. We do a lot of minor hockey. I don't think it's fair to show the kid, make it a really bad play that potentially costs his team the game. You're right. That's sort of the difference there too, right? Is we're covering unpaid amateur athletes, and you guys are covering, professional paid athletes that, need to be held accountable in some situations as well.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about some of these guys that have transitioned from being those university kids to now being professional football players. I want to talk about Eric Starczala, former Guelph Griffin. And the reason I'm really interested in him is, I kind of know what he is on film, but right. I think he's going to play such a huge role for the Argos this year. He may be asked to be the starting center, and he's really only got 1 year of center at Guelph. What are we looking at in this kid?
think you're looking at a hardworking kid who has a good attitude, and he's come up through a system here in our region, being a Cambridge native, where he's had a lot of good coaching along the way. Is there going to be an adjustment? Is he going to need to adapt? Of course he is, going from the tackle position to potentially center. But when I look at Eric Starczala, I say to myself, this is a kid that I had the opportunity to watch in high school. He won a local high school championship called WICSA, which is the Waterloo County Secondary School Athletic Association. He won a championship here. So he's got that pedigree. And you can say a lot of great things about his time at the University of Guelph. Two-time OUA All-Star, and he was coached by Mike McDonald, who, is a veteran coach. He's been there a long time. He's seen a lot. He's gone through some coaching changes. Mike McDonald has, from, the Stu Lang era into Kevin McNeil, Todd Galloway, and now into Ryan Sheehan. But Mike McDonald pumps out winners, and he's hard on them, but he's hard on them in a good way, where he's preparing them for, future opportunities, whether it be the CFL or different opportunities that come along. I think along the way, he's had good coaching. I think he's got a good attitude, and, you never know, right? You gotta go to camp, and you gotta, figure out just the different aspects of the position. But Eric Starczala certainly has the right attitude and the right mindset that, I think he'd have the ability to do it, just from his own personal characteristics and some of the coaches that he's had along the way.
You got me fired up about Eric Starczala now. I go from being like, oh, I don't know, can this guy make it at center, to like, all right, let's go.
We'll see. It's not an easy transition, right? And I don't think anybody's saying that it is. But when you look at a kid like that, and he's a big kid, and I really think that, when you look at having the right mindset, I think that's something that's always important when it comes to, not only sports, but sort of life as well. And he learned those lessons through people like Greg White, who's the head coach of the Jacob Hessler Hawks high school football team in Cambridge. He's learned things from people like Stu Lang, who was the head coach in Guelph, from Mike McDonald, who's the offensive line coach. You put all that together, and he's older now, and he's more mature, and he understands that, he wants to help the team, and he wants to contribute to team success.
Let's go down the road a little bit. I want to talk about a guy that the Argos drafted in Waterloo Warriors running back, Dion Pellerin. He was the first running back off the board. Mm-hmm. What do you think the Argos saw in him that made them say, this is a kid we need on our team?
I think he's scrappy, and I think he can pick up those big yards in those big moments, and he played in an absolutely exceptional offense. I can't say enough good things about the way the Waterloo Warriors under Chris Bertoya have really, turned things around here in the last couple of years. Trey Ford, the quarterback who came out of A.N. Meyer in Niagara Falls, just a stud. Just absolutely exceptional. And they rely a lot on their aerial game with Tyler Ternowski, right, who's also a draft pick of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. That was sort of the 1-2 punch for the Warriors. But then when they needed those big yards on short third downs or goal line or things like that, they turned to Pellerin, they turned to Brandon Metz. And I think that, it forced teams to look at the run game as well, because they are an aerial attack, and Trey can take off and Ternowski can make big catches down the field. But when you've got Pellerin back there and he can chew up those big yards, I think he's a good kid, and, he can be, hopefully, again, we'll see, but hopefully be a good impact player for the Argos.
Yeah, he's a kid I'm really excited about. I didn't get to see too much Waterloo football this year, but anytime I caught a game, there he was. It's that classic Dion Pellerin play where it's the big cloud of dust, and 7 or 8 yards later he's dragging like 4 or 5 bodies. Nothing fancy to it. It's just boom, straight up the middle,
and run straight ahead. Right, run north south, and Trey Ford, the quarterback, is incredibly elusive. He goes east west, he goes north south, he goes every which way. But Pellerin absolutely contributed to the Warriors' success, and they made the playoffs and won a playoff game in OUA football for the first time in a long time. They went to Western for the OUA semifinals, and they lost. Just a heartbreaker, 30-24, a 6-point game. I can remember years where, Waterloo would get blown out going to London to play Western, but it shows you how far that program has come along. Pellerin's been part of it for 4 years, and he's been part of the turnaround. The players that have been there that have kind of gone through the bumps and the different hurdles that they've had to, and now they're starting to see success on the other side of that.
Yeah, that was that Western Waterloo game was absolutely crushing. I was pulling for the Warriors. I got a couple guys that play for Waterloo. I don't have anyone, I don't think, right now playing for Western. So, and I never really liked cheering for Western, but it was soul crushing. But that's sports, and you got to be ready for a result like that, and pick up and get back to it. But what an amazing rebound from a program that had to start from zero, right?
Well, that's it. And what a good experience for those players. And you know this, you've covered sports and been around sports for a long time. Sometimes you need to lose before you win. And, obviously some of the Warriors players, will move on to different opportunities. And there is no OUA football season this coming fall because of our current situation. But I'm really curious to see if Waterloo can really get over that hump when we get back to OUA football, and see if they can get that Yates Cup, because that would be something that would be of great pride to not only the players and the football team, but to the university in general. They've got a beautiful field now that they didn't have for a lot of years, and it's really been fun kind of watching them get back on that horse and watch all the different players under Chris Bertoia that have developed it. And the other thing that they've done too that I really like, Ben, is they've brought in local players from this area, and that's one of the mantras of head coach Chris Bertoia. He says, we want to recruit locally and get the best players in our own backyard. And it's something that's really been effective for him. And he's been able to bring in a lot of kids from the region that have become impact players with the Warriors. So it's got a really nice feel to it when the team is starting to, get on the up and up. They win a playoff game, and you've got all these kids from Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph that end up at the University of Waterloo.
Yeah, they're such an exciting team to watch too. Like the Warriors, when I was in university, that was the sort of, I guess that was the Tuffy Knight era with Eddie Kim and Bradley and Wilkins, that were just they would pass once a game, and every play was just this downhill run. But man, that's an exciting offense to watch. Yep. The fans packing the stadium this past season.
Yep, they've done really well. And the nice thing about it too is that it seats, I shouldn't guess what the number is, but what I can tell you is that the grandstand is full for all the home games, and it's got that nice intimate atmosphere. It's not a big, huge stadium, and the fans are kind of right on top of you. So, when you get into third down situations, you got the bells and you got everything else. It gets loud in there, and it's a really, really good atmosphere. And, on, Black and Gold Day, which is when they have a lot of their first year students out there, there's a hill on the far side, that gets filled up. Everybody's wearing black and gold. So it's a really intimidating atmosphere now. And, I remember, like you said, a lot of years ago, it certainly wasn't intimidating, but they've done a really nice job with recruiting. They've done a really nice job. They just built a big field house, so the players have this beautiful new facility, which is right beside the football field, where they can practice and they can train and they can work out and all those things. It's a nice little bubble, and when you put a couple of thousand people in there on a Saturday afternoon at 1:00, it's a lot of fun. The atmosphere is amazing.
Well, hopefully those few thousand fans will follow Dion Pellerin all the way to the Argos and help fill up BMO whenever we're able to get back there and get fans in the stands, because that's something that the Argos have actually done a nice job of, is bringing in local guys. There's so many guys that the Argos have on their roster now who are from southwestern Ontario. And that's something that they hadn't done for years, and suddenly they're trying to do that. It's the same sort of philosophy that you're talking about with Bertoia and Waterloo, and see if you can make the local guys heroes. So we'll see if Pellerin can take the next step.
Yeah, I think it's really smart. I think, it gives sort of the hometown community, something to cheer about it. And don't get me wrong, Trey Ford, who's from Niagara Falls, like I said, who went to high school at A.N. Meyer, he isn't from Kitchener, Waterloo, Guelph, or Cambridge. And I'm going to tell you, Chris Bertoia is thrilled to have him and his twin brother Tyrell on the roster. But when you surround really good pieces with, people from the community, I don't know. I just think it adds a certain element to it where, it's a lot easier to go out and cheer for your neighbor's kids, things like that.
So you got a really cool shout out the other day. I was listening to the All Ball podcast with Natea J, and he had Justin Dunk on there, who's like Mr. CFL. He knows CFL news before the CFL knows it, before the players know it, before the teams know it. He's so dialed into everything CFL. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned you. He said that you were, I guess in covering him at Guelph, he had asked you about getting into media, and you gave him advice that set him on this path. And Bob's your uncle. Here he is, Mr. CFL.
Yeah, Justin is extraordinarily talented and, obviously well connected. But the one thing that I really appreciate and like about Justin the most is he does things the right way. And that's been my experience with him, not only covering him at the University of Guelph all those years ago, but, working into the media scene that he's into now. He's a CFL insider at its very core. And this is a guy you can talk about CFL, you can talk about university football. He is tuned in. And it's really kind of cool for me that somebody I covered back in 2006-07, sort of during that era, to see him come up and we spoke at that point about, hey, I have some interest in potentially getting involved in the media. We had a few conversations and he sort of took that ball and ran with it and does things in a way that I think is professional, which is something that I'm very big on. I'm very big on doing things the right way in the media. 3 Down Nation, the website that he's got and the platform that he's got with 3 Down Nation is absolutely fantastic. And I urge, any CFL fan, university fan, or just football fan in general to check it out because it's insightful. He knows the game. He knows the X's and O's of the game, but he knows the personalities of the game too. And that's something that, I think is interesting. He can bring really good insight into just the players and their mindset and the personalities and what they're thinking. I have nothing but time for Justin Dunk and what he's done over the last, 5 to 8 years and, wish him continued success, with 3 Down Nation or wherever Justin ends up.
Yeah, no, and 3 Down's an awesome site. And Justin is visible pretty much everywhere that covers CFL because everyone knows, he's the guy that's connected and what a great guy too, to help pass on the stories as well. So that doesn't hurt.
And like I said, I think he did it the right way though, right? Working, in whatever you want to call the mainstream media, if you start getting into the real negative stuff, I think then that's when your phone calls don't get answered anymore. And, he does it professionally, always makes sure it's double sourced, always, checks and double checks and triple checks, everything that comes out of his platform. And good for him. He's been able to build a lot of good relationships and he's still a young guy too. And I'm really interested, long-term to see where he ends up because he's got the right connections. He's got the right, mindset. And the information he puts out is nothing but first rate.
The last guy I want to talk to you about is Chris Ackie. Now, he's a guy I got to know pretty well, but not until after he started his CFL career. You covered him at Laurier. Tell me what a young Chris Ackie was like. How was that covering the speedy Golden Hawk?
Still a big guy. Just a big guy who had wheels, who had speed, who could make all the plays on the field. He's another guy, just like Eric Starczala, who's from Cambridge, and he went through a really good developmental system here with the Preston Panthers, where he played high school football, and he also spent a lot of years with the Cambridge Minor Football Association, which is the Cambridge Lions. And boy, they had a lot of great teams, and Chris he's just a football guy. He's just a football mind, and the thing that I appreciate about Chris, and I actually had the opportunity to see him back in March. The Water of the Region Predators OPFL team here locally was having a sort of one of those winter combines where they get the kids out and, they do the cones and that kind of stuff. And there was Chris, who was out there, in the off season and just speaking to the kids and just sharing his message, his story. The old get your academics, make sure your academics are good, work hard and, put yourself in good positions. And, so aside again from being a a really great football player. And I think anybody who watches Chris Ackie, whether it was in Montreal or Cambridge or wherever he was, Argo fans should be, super excited about this guy on the field and the plays that he makes, the work ethic that he's got, obviously, in the gym and off the field, but also the kind of person he is. And, when he's out there speaking to, 8 to 10-year-olds, giving back his time, he was there for 2 hours. And he must have spoken to 30, 40 kids individually after sort of just, the session that went on. Again, I love stuff like that. Talented guy, understands the importance of giving back and, growing the game at the grassroots level. He's really good friends with Ronnie Peffer, who was, Yates Cup champion there, kicked that game-winning field goal all those years ago at Western. And, there's a nice group of players that came out of that Laurier team. Chris was drafted 4th overall in 2015. And a lot of great players have come out of, Michael Faulds. Let's give a shout out to Ron Van Moorkirk too, who's the defensive coordinator with the Laurier Golden Hawks. Again, another guy that has produced and goes under the radar, but has produced so many, CFL ready players. And I know that's what, the goal is, for these different coordinators and coaches. But when you see a guy like Ron Van Moorkirk, who doesn't get a lot of attention, he is a huge, huge reason, why Chris Ackie, developed the way that he did at Laurier and was able to kind of, make the jump into the CFL.
I got a Chris Ackie story for you that I think you would enjoy. And you were actually there, but it's something that you didn't get a chance to see. So we go back to the 2017 high school football provincial championships. We're at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton. And Chris had been rehabbing his bicep that season. He hadn't been able to play. And so he'd been helping us out, coaching with us that season. And I had him up in the booth for that game, spotting for me. So I had him on a headset. And, he was pretty quiet most of the game because it had been going so well. We were up 21-0, as I'm sure you remember. And then our quarterback tore his ACL, and the Hawks score 25 straight points. And there we are with under a minute to play, 75 yards to go, trailing by 4. Our running back's playing quarterback. And Ackie comes to life on my headset. And we'd been running this jet sweep all game. And one thing I'd asked him to watch for early in the game is I said, Chris, I need to know when that sandbacker stops respecting coverage on our jet action, because we'll take advantage of that. But at this stage of the game, I'd forgotten all about that. It was total chaos. We're running no huddle. And, our guys were making amazing plays. So I call a jet sweep to Chris Haggard, who's now a Laurier Golden Hawk. And Haggard gets all the way down to the 7. And I just hear Ackie on the headset say, the sandbacker's ready. And so 15 seconds left in the game, clock's ticking. We're at the 7-yard line. I call a fake jet pass, and it's a pass over the middle to our number 3 receiver. And he goes up and makes a spectacular catch in the end zone. But Ackie, who's normally a pretty chill guy, just loses it. And so much so that even the play-by-play announcers comment on how Chris Ackie just jumped through the roof.
Here we go. Page out of the shotgun.
Ooh, bad snap.
Bad snap. Picks it up. Looking.
Oh,
touchdown!
Wow. Holy cow.
My goodness.
Wow. Chris Ackie, former Laurier player in the Lorne Park booth here, I think literally jumped out of his shoes.
And so I get my headset back on. I'm trying to congratulate the guys up in the booth for, great spotting that entire game. And as I'm doing that, I get tackled to the ground because somehow in 30 seconds, those guys have been able to come all the way down from the rafters up at Tim Hortons Field to the field level and tackle me before the players have even been able to get to the bench. They were that exciting. You talk about a guy that loves football. Chris Ackie was just over the moon with that win because he's watching these kids that he got to know a little bit, celebrating and, getting a chance to experience such an awesome thing. So, his energy, that kind of attitude, I can't wait to see him play for the Argos.
That was such an amazing game too. And, you guys got up early, and then Jacob Hespler brought in their grade 10 quarterback, a kid named Joel Watson. And it was their second year at an OFSA Bowl and had never won. They had never won an OFSA Bowl, and all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, back came the Hawks, and then you guys come down at the end and win it. And that's what high school football's about, eh? Like just that emotion, the ups and the downs and the sideways and all of it in that game. It was just such an incredible game, and I'm so thrilled that I had the opportunity to cover it through 519 Sports Online, because I think ultimately at the end of the day, whether it be the Lorne Park kids or the Jacob Hesper kids, that video that we've got on 519 Sports is going to live there forever. And everything we just talked about, you can watch on 519. And I think that, that's something that I'm really proud of. Take away all the different elements of business and of marketing and accounting and communications and all those various things, that Ben Grant and I can sit here all these years later, talk about this OFSA game and then go watch the highlight pack, right? From that day, that game, and the adulation for Lorne Park, and obviously the disappointment for Jacob Hesper. Lucky enough for them, they went up to Ottawa the next year, and the third time was the charm, and they ultimately ended up winning their OFSA title.
Yeah, that was I was there for that game too, and that was I was cheering for them. I really wanted to see them win after the heartbreak that I knew they went through.
Yeah, it was tough, but But that's high school sports, or that's amateur sports, and to bring it back to the beginning of the conversation, when you say like, hey, why do you enjoy it and why do you like it? It's for stuff like that, right? That you go from the heartbreak, and then I was up in Ottawa, like you said, and they beat Gananoque, pretty handily. But that same quarterback, Joel Watson, who led the comeback in your game at Lorne Park, ends up getting his OFSA title, right? As the number one pivot, his QB1, a year later. It's just cool. It's just good stories like that that I appreciate and that I really, really enjoy, to be honest with you, Ben.
So, Darren, tell the good people where they can find all of your stuff.
We're on social media, obviously Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at 519 Sports Online. Check out the website, 519sportsonline.ca. If you're looking for all the videos, they are housed with different playlists on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/519 Sports Online.
Awesome. And I want to thank you so much. It's been great, talking to you today, but you've also provided us with a lot of gold to sort of mine our way through here now, as we've got some more tidbits on Starczala and Pellerin and Chris Ackie. So thanks so much, Darren. I really appreciate your time today.
Good to see you, Ben. Take care of yourself, and you're doing a great job with the podcast.
Darren Stevenson from 519 Sports Online. That was awesome. It's so nice to talk to him, but I love talking to anybody who really knows what they're talking about. And Darren Stevenson knows more that is happening in sports in the Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge area than anybody knows about sports in any area. So it was awesome talking to him about some of those Argo players, and of course just catching up as well and changing and sharing some stories. That'll just about do it for us on today's episode. I want to thank Darren Stevenson, and of course JB will be back with us next week. So for me, Ben Grant, so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.